Hello everybody, as you may or may not know, I have very recently, as in 2 hours ago, picked up a 2008 Ferrari 430 Scuderia. And in my time researching this car, I was very disappointed to see that there were no articles or videos out there really giving you the full story as to what Ferrari did in order to turn the regular F430 into the Scuderia. Handily, my contact at Ferrari North Europe dug out some of the old literature from this car's launch, which went into incredible detail about what the team behind this car did. And so today's video is going to be simply a technical explanation showing you all of the crazy small little things Ferrari put into this car in order to make it just that little bit more special. To assist me, I'm here at Dick Lovett today, where I have literally just collected this car. I haven't even driven it properly yet. And to one side we have a regular F430 Spider, just for a bit of reference, and over here, because why not, we have a Challenge Stradale. So let's get on with it, shall we? And let's begin with the looks. There shouldn't be any confusing a Scuderia for the regular car if you spot them from the front, because this has a very different front bumper made from a lightweight composite called RTM. It's not carbon fiber, which I'm very grateful for, because that's expensive if you break it. And you'll notice that this little section here sort of protrudes much more. It's far more angular than you'll find on the regular car. And at the side, you've got this quite distinctive, I think this is one of the Scuderia's hallmarks, this little splitter here in the air extractor. You have also special lightweight alloy wheels. I've had these painted satin gold because I am a tart. In fact, I've even matched myself to them for this video. And you'll note they are obviously, of course, a lot lighter than the regular items on this. The car also sits quite a bit lower, about 15mm, which gives the Scuderia the stance I think the F430 should have always had. Now, if you catch a Scuderia in side profile, there are still a few giveaways that this is not a regular F430. First off, you will have carbon fiber wing mirrors, and that's standard. You've also got much beefier side skirts here. And this is one of these things you can't really spot until you get the two cars side by side. This is massively chunkier than the regular car and presumably serves some real aerodynamic purpose. Perhaps the most dramatic change, though, is at the back. As you can probably see, they are quite different cars. The regular F430 has its exhaust down here, whereas the Scuderia, they have moved into the center of the diffuser. The diffuser itself has grown quite significantly. It's got more fins in it, it's more steeply raked internally, and you've also got this very distinctive panel here. I have seen this fitted to a number of regular F430s, so if you do spot a car with this rear, do not assert that it is going to be a Scuderia. This little spoiler at the back here is slightly more aggressive as well, and you'll find this rear engine cover is not glass. It's a lightweight Lexan, just like you'd find in a Challenge Stradale, like the one we have here. It's even got the same sort of carbon fiber supports under it. Now, all of this aero trickery is not for nothing, because the 430 Scuderia produces about 10% more downforce than the regular F430 for no increase in drag. It makes about 310 kilos of downforce at 186 miles an hour. That's 300 kilometers an hour. And to give you some idea, a 991.1911 GT3 RS produces a bit more downforce, but to do that, it needs a thumping great big wing. So it's very clever engineering. Now, it's here for me where the 430 Scuderia really shines in comparison to the earlier Challenge Stradale. First off, you have this acreage of carbon fiber, which is all standard, and it looks rather lovely. The engine's power and torque figures aren't dramatically different from the regular car. Peak power is up by less than 20 horsepower and torque up by only the smallest of margins, about 1%. But when you look closer into how those figures were achieved, you start to gain an appreciation of just how special this car really is. Now, discussion abounds as to how different a Challenge Stradale's engine really is over a regular 360, with some people saying they are special hand-picked, blueprinted, low-tolerance lumps, and other people simply saying it's a normal 360 engine with a different map on it. The Scuderia, though, no such argument to be had, because they are definitely different. The compression ratio has been bumped up from about 11.3 to just under 11.9. Naturally, work has been done to help this car breathe easier. On the intake side, you have this larger and hand-polished internally carbon intake. You've got these slightly larger carbon air boxes. Then on the exhaust side, you have all new exhaust, including new manifolds, which do not have the troublesome pre-catalysts that the regular F430 does. And note, by the way, there that I say F430. This is just a 430. They saved weight by dropping the F out of it. Ferrari also spent time optimizing the oil flow within the engine so this car can cool itself just a little bit better than regular, and they made sure the crankcase could breathe easier and they dropped the internal pressure. I don't really understand why that helps, but apparently it does. Now, at some point during the Scuderia's development, I think Ferrari stopped using engineering and started simply using magic, because they say this car is louder than a Challenge Stradale when it's under full acceleration, but when you're just cruising along at 60 miles an hour in the cabin, it's no more difficult to hear each other speak than it would be in a regular F430 coupe. And that is impressive and very important for me, because I do intend to put some serious miles on this car. Perhaps one of the greatest divides between these two cars is in the gearbox. Both have as their only transmission option Ferrari's F1 automated manual single clutch box. In the 360, it was generally regarded as something of a weak point. However, in the 430 Scuderia, it's pretty much the star of the show. You see, by the time this car came into production, Ferrari had been working on their gearbox technology for quite some time. And here, at long last, they really got it right. Thanks to a combination of some very, very clever software and hardware, this car can change gear under the right conditions in just 60 milliseconds. Now, all of Ferrari's literature at the time will tell you that that was the same speed as Michael Schumacher's Formula One car was doing only a couple of years earlier. It is pretty much the only single clutch gearbox car I have ever driven where it actually really does work. The main thing Ferrari improved apparently was in the sensors, which meant that in the old cars they changed gear kind of like you thought that they would. The throttle is lifted, then the clutch is depressed, then the gear is selected, clutch lifted back up, and then the throttle is resumed. However, with this, it changes kind of like a sort of sporty human would, where we're doing multiple things pretty much at the same time. And that's how the Scuderia achieved its, well, witchcraft. To give you an idea of just how quick and how advanced this system was, the second fastest car I could find that Ferrari made was the 599 GTO, and that was about 85 milliseconds to shift. A 575 by comparison is 250. And not only that, but because the software was so much more clever, clutch wear is actually improved too. So this car, despite having 22,000 miles on it, is, I believe, on its original clutch, and it's only about 30% worn. Now, the Ferrari press office told me that when they had one of these in, they did 18,000 miles in it. And those are journalist miles, and they never had to do the clutch. Other cars before this, it was fairly frequent for them to have to do the clutch every sort of 5,000 to 6,000 miles, because, as you might imagine, they wanted to make sure the car always went out with the clutch in good condition. And as journalists do like to do, launch controls and things like that, the cars just ate through them. That's just how they work. You do the same thing being that aggressive in a manual car. But with these, never a problem. Brilliant. Ferrari called the system F1 Superfast too, and I expect if, like me, you're a bit of a car geek, you might have known all of this already. But did you know that for the 430 Scuderia, Ferrari also shortened 4 of the 6 gear ratios? Because I didn't. First and second are unchanged over the regular F430, but third through sixth are all marginally shorter. And that's just one of the ways Ferrari managed to make some pretty significant gains in terms of numbers with the Scuderia. So 0 to 60 time dropped by about half a second over the regular car. Top speed, surprisingly, is also up by a few miles an hour, and they dropped 2 seconds off the Fiorano lap time. In fact, famously, this car managed to match or beat an Enzo round that track when it was brand new. Now, as far as I understand it, if you gave it a longer circuit, the Enzo would still beat it, somewhere like Spa probably. But the fact that this could come even close to what was then still Ferrari's current hypercar is very impressive. Now, of course, a lot of this performance improvement came through weight saving, and Ferrari claim about 100 kilos is shaved out of this car versus the regular F430. Most impressively, and this is not a figure from Ferrari, this is something I found out independently, this is only 20 kilos heavier than a Challenge Stradale. It sits on the scales at roughly 1,400 kilos, depending on specification. About 10 kilos of that weight loss came out of what Ferrari called chassis. So you might already know that it has carbon ceramic brakes on it. Enormous carbon ceramics, 398 millimeters at the front, the same size as you'll find on the current LaFerrari. But did you know that the centers on the discs are carbon too? Did you know that the springs are titanium? The anti-roll bars are hollow. Even the wheel bolts are lightweight titanium as standard on a Scuderia, with 5 of them apparently weighing the same as just one regular bolt. Ferrari even made changes to the steering rack. Not only is it a little quicker, but it's actually physically lighter as well. Perhaps the most significant differences, though, can be found inside. Now, if somehow you'd spotted one of these in the wild and you hadn't realised it was a Scuderia, as soon as you opened the door, the game would be up. The regular F430 is a rather plush thing with leather on pretty much every conceivable surface. I absolutely adore it. It feels to me like one of the last truly old-school Ferraris. The 458 is a big step forward and much better in many ways, but for me, there's just something special about the feel of the regular car. This is a very different animal, and I must admit, when I bought this car, I was quite concerned that I wouldn't really like the interior. As you can tell, it's quite bare to the extent that there are no carpets in it at all. This is just the bare aluminium chassis, but it looks rather nice, and it also looks, to my eyes, just that little bit more upmarket and more finished and refined than the Challenge Stradale. There's quite a few different ways you could have had your Scuderia, but most people went for this Alcantara interior with a mix of technical fabrics, so you've got some on these seats and in the headliner here. Now, the seats themselves are carbon fibre. They do have folding backrests, and you can actually get into the rear quite easily. There's space behind them. These are large. You can get them in several sizes, and I'm very grateful that they're large. They're actually much more comfortable than you would imagine too. But the 430 Scuderia debuted quite a few things for Ferrari. Now, most important of which is the addition of what we now call Bumpy road mode. So down here in the central tunnel, you will find a little suspension button. And that means that whatever mode you've got your little Manettino here in, you can always have the softest suspension settings. Allegedly, this was at the request of a certain Mr. M. Schumacher, whose name appears quite a lot in the technical literature for this car. The Manettino itself has also undergone some changes versus the regular car. Wet mode is gone. They have now what you would call a sort of normal mode, or it looks like a sort of icy road icon. And then you have sport, then you've got race. You then have a new mode introduced for this car, which is the CT off. That disables entirely the traction control, but not the stability control. So you can have quite a lot of fun, but there's still something of a safety net. That is until you turn the dial all the way around, hold it, wait for the beep, and then you are on your own. There weren't really many options to choose from if you bought a 430 Scuderia, but this car does have a few nonetheless. The Alcantara interior wasn't standard, it was technical fabric by default, and indeed even the regular fabric interior has Alcantara as well. The Alcantara interior has fabric too, and in fact the leather interior, a very rare option, has leather, Alcantara and technical fabric. So options include these lovely 4-point race harnesses, which are actually really quite nice, this rollover bar in the back, and you could get those two things separately. So I've seen cars with a rollover hoop and no harness, and I've seen harnesses and no rollover hoop. This car also has the carbon fibre steering wheel with the LEDs up here. And remember, only about 5 years before this car came out, we had the Enzo. And that, I believe, was one of the first cars to have shift lights on the wheel. Enzo didn't actually even have a Manettino in it. So this car shows you just how quickly Ferrari were progressing. You do have a fire extinguisher, and like the rollover hoop in Ferrari tradition, it's covered in lovely Alcantara. So it looks really good. This car does not have a stereo, which is a shame, although the regular stereo option is not very good. So I may be fixing that at some point in the near future. It does have air conditioning, which is something they all came with as standard, but in here otherwise nothing particularly spectacular about this precise car. Other options you could have for the 430 include the Nart stripe, which nearly every single one seems to have, mine here in contrast grey. You could have this little front bridge down here in carbon fibre. You could have the diffuser in carbon fibre too. These headlight covers you could also get in carbon fibre, and this has those. You could even get the side skirts in carbon too, and that gives the car a bit of a sort of 512 BB sort of throwback look. There was even the option of a matching carbon fibre racing helmet. although I'm not sure many people probably ever ordered one of those. I know the internet would have you believe that the Challenge Stradale is the king of the mid-engine Ferrari specials. I have yet to actually drive one of these, although if an owner is out there watching this and is happy for me to drive their car, please do get in touch and I will make the inevitable comparison video. But I hope you can see now from what I've had to tell you that this really was far from a lazy piece of engineering. In fact, in many ways, I believe this was a more considerable overhaul of the base car than the Challenge Stradale was. I know owners of Stradales will say that they are the superior car because they are louder, they are more raw, they are more analog. But for me, that actually was a selling point for the 430. I wanted something that was still just about usable. I could still do some miles in without getting a headache. And price-wise, the 430 is in a very strange place too. You see, this is cheaper than this by some margin, and quite a bit cheaper than a 458 Speciale. And the way I saw it was that this is more powerful, more usable, and just probably a little bit more dependable than a Stradale. It's also rarer, a touch more special, and has that old analog feel about it in comparison to a Speciale, and it's cheaper than both. So, to me, it just seemed like a kind of a no-brainer. Anyway, I hope you found this video enjoyable and informative. I want to say a huge thank you, of course, to Dick Lovett for being great sports with my car collection and humouring me by allowing me to spend a good few hours here in their showroom filming with all of these lovely cars. So, as ever, any questions you want to know, anything you think I haven't covered, please pop into the comment section down below and I will see you for the next one, where I promise I will be driving this. Bye-bye. Oh